Greetings, this is Darth Vader here, and I would be honored if you would join me as well as Cecil Arthurton 3795 as we discuss how my fate and the fate of the entire galaxy would have changed if I had killed Palpatine instead of Count Dooku on board the Invisible Hand. Let us go back to that fateful day where Count Dooku was in front of me, on his knees. Pause. And I am ready to decapitate him. Instead of him silently taking his death, he simply decides to telepathically communicate everything with me. For that moment, time stands still, and everything goes black. I see a vision of Dooku speaking with the hooded man. I see him kneeling before that hooded man. And then finally, I see him discussing with Obi-Wan that the Senate is under the control of a Dark Lord of the Sith. And then all of a sudden, it makes sense to me. I see Palpatine. He's not who he says he is. This war, the turmoil in the Senate, the death of Qui-Gon, the near death of Padme, it was all Palpatine's fault. Palpatine was not who he says he is. He is the Dark Lord of the Sith. I awaken from that vision with more clarity than I ever had in my entire life. I lift up my lightsaber, pretending to strike down Count Dooku, and instead I pivot and strike down Darth Sidious. Dooku recovers and stands up and thanks me for sparing his life and explains that we must work together to ensure a peaceful ceasefire so that we can end these hostilities, which were all for nothing anyway. I go and rescue Obi-Wan, and then Obi-Wan, Count Dooku, and myself make our way down to General Grievous, where Count Dooku orders General Grievous and the droids to stand down. Dooku goes back to the Jedi Council and decides to explain everything to him. However, they are extremely skeptical of him because he was just a Sith Lord killing Jedi left and right. For all they know, this could be another separatist trick. So they decide to listen to him thoroughly, and they ask him to produce some hard physical evidence before they take this to the Senate. Meanwhile, back at the Senate, the death of Palpatine has reached the ears of everyone, who immediately appoint Mas Amedda, who was Palpatine's next in command, to be the new Supreme Chancellor. Mas Amedda was a personal friend of Palpatine's, knew about his Sith identity, and knew about the plan to destroy the Jedi. He stands extremely skeptical that Palpatine just happened to die. So he orders his technicians to go investigate the footage from the Invisible Hand, where they find footage of myself, a Jedi, decapitating Palpatine. They also find footage of me working with Dooku and Grievous, and so Mas Amedda becomes convinced that the Jedi have gone rogue and joined with the Separatists. This causes even more turmoil because while Dooku is trying to state his case before the entire Senate, Mas Amedda barges in and shows them footage of me decapitating Palpatine and working with the Separatists. This causes complete chaos as the Senate becomes split down the middle of whether to immediately condemn the Jedi or to let them explain themselves. But before they have time to come to a decision, Mas Amedda orders Order 66, which causes the Great Jedi Purge to begin out of revenge for the death of Palpatine, who was his friend and close associate. So you see Jedi that are surrounded by what were once friendly clone troopers and hostile battle droids. Now instead they are surrounded by hostile clone troopers and friendly battle droids. Dooku had ordered the battle droids to switch sides and instead support the Jedi against the rogue clone troopers. And this is really bad optics for the war because watching the Jedi switch sides makes the Jedi look even worse and further emboldens Republic resources to be used to try to hunt down the Jedi. I, as well as Yoda and Obi-Wan, find ourselves absolutely surrounded by clone troopers that are trying to gun us down when out of nowhere, General Grievous barges in and saves the day. He starts rescuing me, Yoda, and Obi-Wan from the clone troopers. He leaps over them, slicing them up, slicing up their weapons, slicing them in half, pulling them out of windows and crunching their bones and just completely obliterating them. I never thought I would be so happy to see General Grievous. I still look at him and tell him that he's still shorter than I was expected, but he ends up saving us and rescuing us from the Senate chambers. Meanwhile, certain senators who are more sympathetic towards the Jedi end up discussing in private that they are skeptical of Mas Amedda's accusations against the Jedi. They think that there is more to this story, and they're not entirely convinced that the Jedi are guilty and that Mas Amedda is innocent. So this results in myself, Obi-Wan, Padme, and R2-D2 secretly sneaking into Palpatine's office in the middle of the night, and we recover hard evidence that links him to the Sith, and we recover recordings of his discussions with Count Dooku, which we then bring back to the Jedi Council chambers, and we show it to them, and they are now ready with hard evidence to move against Mas Amedda, as well as save face before the Republic. Mace Windu gathers his gang of insufficient misfits, and they go to arrest Mas Amedda. Mas Amedda decides to defend himself, and he ends up killing Kit Fisto in the process, because Kit Fisto must have Krillin disease or something. However, Mace Windu ends up arresting Mas Amedda at lightsaber point and drags him in front of the Senate and forces him, at the point of a lightsaber, on pain of death, to confess everything. Mas Amedda, being the coward that he is, decides to confess. He explains everything. He explains the grand plan to destroy the Jedi. He explains everything he knows about Palpatine, how he's been playing the war from both sides. He even gives the Senate Palpatine's bank account numbers to prove everything. Dooku is also able to present his recordings. I am able to present the hard evidence that I found in Palpatine's office. And all of this together is enough to give the Senate and the Republic a complete picture of what is happening. They hold an emergency election where they vote unanimously to have Bail Organa become the next Supreme Chancellor, and he sentences Mas Amedda to death. Later on, the Republic and the Separatists sign a peace treaty as well as a ceasefire where they are ready to end hostilities and eventually allow the Separatists to control their own planets, and Dooku and General Grievous are lauded as heroes who rescued the Jedi in their time of need and who rescued the Separatists from the oppressive forces of the Republic, thus bringing to fruition the statement in the beginning of Revenge of the Sith where there are heroes on both sides. The remaining clone troopers that didn't get killed by the Jedi and the droids are deconditioned from their inhibitor chip and are now no longer under Order 66. The Republic opens up peaceful trade relations with the Separatists, allowing them to exchange technology. Padme and I retire from public life and go and live on Naboo peacefully, and that is the end of the story. Or is it? You thought I'd stop there? Decades later, Leia becomes the new Supreme Chancellor, Luke becomes the Grand Master of the Jedi Order, and the Yuuzhan Vong prepare to invade the Galactic Republic. However, Chancellor Leia stands fully ready to defend her entire system because after decades of trade with the Separatists, Leia now has a complement of stormtroopers as well as battle droids that she bought from the Separatist army. And if that's not enough, she has an entire fleet of Death Stars ready to completely lay the smackdown on the Yuuzhan Vong and protect the galaxy from evil. And that is how the story truly would end if I had killed Palpatine instead of Dooku on board the Invisible Hand. Let me know what you think in the comments down below.